And for more on China's economic relationship with the United States and what we can expect during President Xi's state visit, I'm joined now by Dan McClory in New York. He leads the China practice at the financial firm Burnham Securities. Welcome to our broadcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Susan. Always great to be on your show.
The world's two largest economies have much to gain as partners. Can you tell us more about the economic relationship between these two and how we can expect them to improve moving forward?
Absolutely. I think it's always instructive to separate the politics and sometimes the policy and all of the accords and agreements and take a look at deals that are getting done on the ground. This bilateral relationship between China and the U.S. is only going to strengthen over time. At Burnham Securities, we've been involved in a couple of transactions lately that I think help define exactly how the U.S. and China are working together with what we now refer to as China outbound investment. We've seen Chinese companies, especially state-owned enterprises, start to open up and look at targets in the United States, look at partners, look at acquisitions, but they're doing it with the help of strong funds, strong principals with backgrounds in investments and international and acquisitions. Recently, for example, Susan, there's a transaction where AVIC, which is a large state-owned enterprise in China, decided that their automotive unit would like to acquire an automotive services business in the Detroit area. So they enrolled one of our partner funds, which is called Bohai Harvest Rosemont, to be their intermediary and to provide $600 million worth of funding to acquire a highly engineered automotive systems company. I'll tell you that SOA reform is obviously a key part of the reform dialogue of President Xi and something that's going to be discussed for months and years to come. But this is a great example of how a transaction has gotten done very recently, and it wouldn't have happened without the seasoned professionals at Bohai Harvest Rosemont and their international backgrounds.
Certainly just one of their outbound investments. Let's move on now to the Bilateral Investment Treaty. Can you tell us more about this? She's been regarded widely as a golden opportunity to make major advancements in the negotiations. What more will they be doing to boost trades?
Again, I think it's going to come down to making things happen at the deal level, bringing companies together. There are U.S. and certainly other nations that are desirous of moving into China, but see some roadblocks and barriers to being able to do that. And likewise, Chinese companies, especially in sectors of national security, are finding a lot of red tape and some difficulties in being able to engage in America. But we need to look at deals that are getting done and where transactions are happening. For example, right now, there's an IPO that's coming to market in the U.S. for a company from China called Fuling, and their ticker symbol on NASDAQ will be FORK, F-O-R-K. Susan, they produce almost all the plastic knives, forks, and spoons and drinking straws for the fast food industry in the U.S. And guess what? They've had the foresight and the vision as a Chinese company to set up manufacturing in Allentown, Pennsylvania. They're actually reshoring manufacturing from China to the U.S. to reduce costs. And you might say, Dan, I thought China was the least expensive place on the planet to produce, but it's not. We all know that labor costs are rising. We know that utility costs of energy are between 3 and 5 times as much as the U.S. And certainly shipping costs to move goods from China to the U.S. can be as much as 40 or 50% of cost of goods sold. So it's not so far-fetched to find forward-thinking companies like Fuling that are willing to set up shop in the U.S., create jobs, bring Chinese technology to America.
Well, we're talking about all these investments and investments abroad right here, but let's talk about China's trouble, Dan, in the stock market and the ripple effects that it's caused. How are these two going to work together? China investing here, but yet still having problems at home.
Well, Susan, we all know that China is in the midst of what I would call the economic triathlon. So they're simultaneously trying to do 3 things. They're liberalizing their financial services industry. They're moving from a manufacturing to a services economy, and they're trying to maintain an incredibly high rate of growth. Now, on top of all that, you look at the turmoil in the stock market, and I can tell you that when Shanghai hit its peak, the Dow, the S&P barely reacted. Well, now that Shanghai has come off that, and there's been some turbulence, and there's been some volatility, that ripple effect is extended to the U.S. It kind of reminds me of when I was a kid, we used to play a game at birthday parties. It was called Chinese handcuffs, one of those round cylinders of woven material. You'd put your finger in, your friend would put their finger in. You'd try to pull them apart, and when you tried to pull it apart, guess what happened? It only tightened. So when U.S. and China come together, when we try to pull apart on a variety of issues, our ties are strengthened. We're inextricably linked, and you're going to see us continue to cooperate.
That's such a great analogy, Dan McClory. We really appreciate it, from Burnham Securities, live from New York. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Susan.